What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. You have already seen the wide receiver rankings for week 2 on this channel. Right now, we are going to go through the top 36 running backs for week 2. Obviously, still some injury reports to see. At the time of this recording, it is actually Tuesday night, so definitely a lot more information still needing to come out, but I wanted to get you guys this list regardless. Updates will come in the Discord. Updates will come on the channel as the week progresses, but let's not waste any more time. I want to talk about these players, where I have them ranked, what type of tiers they are going to be in, and what we can expect from them here in week 2 of the fantasy football season. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these running backs. So as you can see, I have the tier maker pulled up on the screen as we speak. I got 7 tiers to get through the top 36 guys here in today's video. So we are going to be starting off in tier 1. And in tier 1, we are going to call this the elite running back ones in week 2. Starting off as the running back 1 overall on the week. Number 1 is Saquon Barkley. He does play against the Atlanta Falcons. He carried the ball 24 times last week for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns, while he also added 2 catches for 23 yards and a 3rd touchdown in a 34-29 win over the Packers in Brazil. Now, Barkley, he operated as this team's bell cow. He appears like he's going to be primed for a career year here in Philadelphia if he can stay healthy, and I think he is going to smash for the majority of the season, and he is my RB1 here in week 2. Now, coming in at the 2nd running back in this list, it is going to be Breece Hall. He does play against the Tennessee Titans on the road in this matchup. He rushed the ball 16 times for 54 yards and a touchdown. He caught 5 passes for 60 yards here in week 1. The efficiency on the ground, it was a little bit rough, but the usage, it's elite. It's everything you want to see in a PPR league. He's going to have a lot of value, especially because he's being used in the receiving game quite often with Aaron Rodgers under center. I expect him to be an elite running back moving forward and somebody we can definitely rely on. Now, coming in 3rd overall in these rankings, it is going to be Bijan Robinson for the Atlanta Falcons. He plays on the road against the Philadelphia Eagles. He rushed the ball 18 times last week for 68 yards. He caught all 5 of his targets for 43 yards in week 1, and he also led this team in receptions. Now, the usage, it is everything that we wanted. The Arthur Smith shenanigans out the door. He is being used as a bell cow. He is being used as an elite running back 1, and I think he could actually threaten at the overall running back 1 spot here this year. He is a must start in every single format and a must start for me here in week 2 of the fantasy football season. Now, moving on to my tier 2 of running backs. These are still going to be running back 1s. We'll call them the high-end running back 1s. I have Jonathan Taylor as my 4th overall guy. He plays on the road at the Green Bay Packers. This game may not be that competitive now that Jordan Love is no longer going to be under center. It is most likely going to be Malik Willis. But Jonathan Taylor, he was a workhorse back in the backfield here in week 1. He saw 96% of the snaps at the running back position. He rushed 16 times for 48 yards. No other running back got a carry in this backfield. He also scored a rushing touchdown. The usage is everything you want to see. He didn't have a major day. He only averaged about 3 yards per carry in that game. He was kind of held in check by that Texans defense. That defense is tough. You know who's not? The Green Bay Packers, who just gave up 3 touchdowns to Saquon Barkley in Brazil. I think this is going to be a much better matchup for Jonathan Taylor and somebody who can have top 5 upside here in week 2. Now, coming in at my running back 5, I am going to have Isiah Pacheco for the Kansas City Chiefs. He carried the ball 15 times last week in his matchup. He went for 45 yards. He had a touchdown as well. He added 2 catches in this game for 33 yards. There was a lot of rumblings about maybe getting P. Ryan involved. That really didn't look like it was going to be too much involvement. Now, he does have this backfield locked and loaded for Kansas City, at least at the moment, as the clear-cut RB1. There really is no other competition in this backfield. He does get this solid matchup against Cincinnati, who did let Rhamondre Stevenson run a little bit wild on them. I think Isiah Pacheco is going to be in for a good day, and I think he has a lot of touchdown upside in this offense because they are always scoring so much. So Isiah Pacheco, he's always going to be in store for at least a chance at a touchdown pretty much every given week. So he comes in this week for me as my 5th overall running back. Moving on to my running back 6, I have Derrick Henry for the Baltimore Ravens, and I get it because I looked at Derrick Henry last week and I didn't really love what I see either. The reality is he does look a little bit slow. He was taken off of the football field, but that was a very competitive matchup. This matchup that he has here in Las Vegas should not be competitive. So if there are going to be games where Derrick Henry does get a ton of carries, even though the chatter right now is they don't want to give him, 30 plus carries a game, whatever, if he's going to get a ton of them, it's going to be games where they are winning and they are grinding out the clock. Obviously, that game in Kansas City, not necessarily a game where they could just run out the clock because they were leading. They'll probably be leading leading for a good majority of this game here against the Las Vegas Raiders. He still got in the end zone last week. This is a guy that I'm still keeping my eye on. I'm not super confident in Derrick Henry right now just based off of what I saw in week 1, but he should have a monster workload in week 2, and there is a real chance that he can get it back on track here in week 2. So coming in as my running back 7, I am going to have Achane. Now listen, I did mention that this is being recorded on Tuesday. He did not practice on Tuesday. There is chatter that he may practice on Wednesday. Just make sure you join our Discord. We do have a Discord linked in the description. It's free to join. I will have updates in there. There's going to be more videos on the channel as well, so make sure you stay updated, but I'm going to operate as if Achane is playing this week versus the Buffalo Bills. Like I said, that could change. But just looking at last week for Achane, he saw more action than I think we all really even anticipated. He had 10 carries. He was getting goal line carries. He was being used as a receiver. He caught 7 of his 7 targets, basically for 76 yards, working as the wide receiver 3 pretty much in this offense. He saw a 32% target rate. This is going to be worth monitoring, as I mentioned, because of the injury. But if Achane is on the field, and if this is the type of usage that he is going to receive here in 2024, this is a guy who is going to be dominant for fantasy football and a guy that we cannot put on our bench. He is always going to have to be in our starting lineup every time that he is healthy and on the field. So Achane comes in for me as my running back 7. Now coming in at my running back 8, I am going to have Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. He plays a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week, and last week's game against the Rams was a little bit of a weird game. He was kind of inefficient on the ground. He didn't see much involvement early in the game. It was a little bit more David Montgomery. It picked up a little bit later in the game. He ended up scoring a touchdown. He caught all 4 of his passes, which did lead to him having a very solid fantasy football day. Now, his floor may be a little bit lower on a week-to-week basis, just while he's splitting some of these touches with David Montgomery, but this matchup against Tampa Bay should be another good matchup for Jahmyr Gibbs, and I still think he has running back 1 upside here this week. Now let's move on to my tier 3 here. Tier 3, we're going to call the low-end running back 1. So the tier 2 was the high end. This is the low ends. Coming in at running back 9, it is going to be Kyren Williams at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this was kind of an up and down game for Kyren Williams last weekend. He did see the heavy involvement. The workload was basically what we saw last year. He saw 99.9% of the workload. Blake Corum didn't even get a carry in this one. The problem was the offensive line. It is bad. There is a lot of issues with this offensive line. There's a lot of injuries. It's a mess. It could be very problematic as this season goes on. And because of that, he was inefficient and he rushed for just 2.8 yards per carry. Now, it is worth noting, Puka Nacua on IR, maybe they're going to lean on Kyren Williams. They don't really want to overload him. At least that's what they keep saying. Actions are going to speak louder than words. I'm not too worried about Kyren yet. Right now, still obviously a low-end running back 1 for me this week and a top 10 guy in my rankings. Now, let's move on to my running back 10. My running back 10 is going to be Joe Mixon of the Houston Texans. He plays against the Chicago Bears, and in week 1, Joe Mixon was used as an absolute bell cow in his debut with the Houston Texans. He ran for 159 yards and 1 touchdown on 30 carries. He also went 3 for 3 on his targets for 19 yards receiving. The Bears' defensive line is good, but as long as Joe Mixon is going to get this type of volume, he is a running back 1 type of play every single week. So throw Joe Mixon in as a top 10 guy this week. Coming in at my running back 11, I have James Cook for the Buffalo Bills. He is going to be playing on the road at the Miami Dolphins. Last week, he rushed for 71 yards on 19 carries in week 1 versus the Cardinals. He also added 3 receptions for about 32 yards, but he did get vultured by Josh Allen twice within 10 yards of the goal line. So that is going to hurt his weekly upside. That is probably something that is going to continue happening, but he should have enough volume. He should be used in the receiving game enough, and especially on the ground as well, that he is going to have a solid floor. So somebody we can still rely on as a low-end running back 1. Now coming in for me at running back 12, it is going to be James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. He gets to play against the Los Angeles Rams. Last week, he tallied about 50 rushing yards and 1 touchdown on 16 carries against the Bills. He also went 3 for 4 in the receiving game for 33 yards. He averaged about 3.1 yards per carry, but the bulk of his rushing did come from a 20-yard rush, so definitely something to monitor. I think he is still going to get the bulk of the workload here in this backfield, and he's still somebody we can rely on as a running back 1, and they are going to continue using him on the goal line every time they get in that situation. So James Conner still a safe running back 1 play for us here in week 2. Now coming in at my running back 13, we do have Kenneth Walker, who does play on the road at the New England Patriots. He did finish his week 1 game on the sideline with an abdominal injury, so that is something that we're going to keep our eye on as the week progresses as well. But he had 20 carries, he went for 103 yards and a touchdown. He also caught 2 of his 3 targets for about 6 yards receiving. So it looks like when he is on the field, he is going to be used as a bell cow. Zach Charbonnet did not get any touches really until Kenneth Walker got hurt. I don't know if it's going to be that serious. It hasn't really sounded like like it's going to be that serious. So for me, he's still a low-end running back 1 play for me this week and still a top 13 play at the position. Now coming in, the last and final guy in my tier 3 for the low-end running back 1s, it is going to be Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers. And I know I said we're going to be operating as if the Miami Dolphins backfield is healthy. We've already kind of got some rumblings that Adam Schefter has mentioned that CMC, Christian McCaffrey, is most likely going to miss week 2. I don't know if it's necessarily confirmed, but that is more kind of information than we have about the Dolphins backfield at the moment. We are going to just operate as if Christian McCaffrey is out here. With that being said, look, he rushed the ball 28 times for 150 yards. He was very, very efficient in this game against a good defense in the New York Jets. This is a good rushing offense. We know that with Kyle Shanahan. If Jordan Mason is the starter, he's most likely going to give you these low-end running back 1 weeks, these high-end running back 2 weeks. It's going to be a very good week for Jordan Mason if he is the starting running back, seeing the bulk of the carries. I have him as a top 14 guy if CMC cannot go. Now moving on to my tier 4, we are going to look at these guys as the safe running back 2 plays. Coming in at my running back 15, I am going to have Alvin Kamara. He plays against the Dallas Cowboys on the road. It's actually in Dallas, this one. Last weekend, rushed 15 times for 83 yards and a touchdown. It was a blowout victory against the Carolina Panthers. He also hauled in all 5 of his targets for about 27 yards. He's still going to be used. This one's going to be a lot more competitive, and I think because of that, Alvin Kamara is going to get a little bit more usage. They're not going to go to the Jamal Williams that they went to last weekend. They'll rely on Alvin Kamara. Still a top 15 play for me here this week in week 2. Now coming in at my running back 16, I am going to have Rachaad White. Rachaad White plays on the road at the Detroit Lions. He rushed the ball 15 times for 31 yards. He also caught 6 passes for 75 yards. That is the bread and butter of what Rachaad White does for our fantasy football teams. He is a PPR monster, so if you're in a half-point PPR or full-point PPR league, he is going to have more value than obviously that standard league. Not a very efficient runner on the ground. He only averaged 2.1 yards per carry. This is nothing new. Bucky Irving, he did get involved, but that was after the game was out of reach. Rachaad White still should be a bell cow, still should be used in the receiving game, and still a guy that we can view as a running back 2 in fantasy football. Now let's move on to my running back 17. Running back 17 is going to be Josh Jacobs for the Green Bay Packers. Now he plays against the Indianapolis Colts. As I mentioned, this is a game with Malik Willis under center. That is probably the only reason why we are pushing Josh Jacobs down to running back 17. I think they're going to have to lean on Josh Jacobs, but the reality is this is an offense that could score 0 points. That is in the range of outcomes for the Green Bay Packers. It could be an absolute blowout. The reality, if that is actually going to happen, probably a smaller chance, but obviously you know what I mean. When I say Malik Willis is under center, this could be bad things for the Green Bay Packers. Josh Jacobs, though, he did pick it up in the second half of that last game. He averaged about 5.3 yards per attempt. He had 5 carries inside the red zone, so that was good for Josh Jacobs as well. 2 of his catches were for about 20 yards. He ran into a stacked box in just 6.3% of his carries. This is going to be a very, very solid season for Josh Jacobs. It looked scary for a second at the beginning of that game, but it looks like it's going to be a solid season for Josh Jacobs. We just might have a couple bad weeks here where Malik Willis is under center. Now let's move on to my running back 18. Running back 18 is going to be Travis Etienne. He plays against a very good defensive line in Cleveland. Last week, he carried the ball 12 times for 44 yards. He had 1 touchdown as well. Obviously, he lost that fumble that would have been his second rushing touchdown of the day, and it goes for that touchback. Obviously cost him the game against the Dolphins. That said, Tank Bigsby was a lot more involved than we thought he would be. I don't know if that was because he fumbled. Obviously, there were more carries that happened from Bigsby after Etienne fumbled. But that being said, I think Etienne's still a guy that we can rely on as a running back too. This is just a little bit of a tougher matchup here this week, so he does come in as my running back 18. Now let's move on to running back 19. 19 is going to be Rhamondre Stevenson for the New England Patriots. He plays against the Seattle Seahawks. This is a solid defense here in Seattle under Mike McDonald. Rhamondre Stevenson, he rushed for 120 yards last week. He had 1 touchdown. He had 25 carries. He saw the bulk of the workload. That is probably going to be the same story for Rhamondre Stevenson here this week. He's probably going to be the number 1 back in this backfield. The problem is it may not be the same type of game script as they had last week, but I guess never say never, because we didn't expect the Cincinnati game script to happen. They do have the Seahawks. I don't know if that's going to be the norm of them just running out the clock, playing with a lead. That probably is not the norm for the New England Patriots, but that being said, he is still a guy that I think we can rely on as a running back 2 in fantasy football. Now coming in at my running back 20, this is a little bit of a surpriser from last week. J.K. Dobbins actually looked really good. He looked really healthy. He still looks like he's running with an injury, kind of runs with a limp, but they do play the Carolina Panthers, and you saw what the New Orleans Saints did to the Carolina Panthers. Last week, J.K. Dobbins, he went 135 on 10 carries. He averaged an impressive 13.5 yards per carry, including a 61-yard touchdown. Look, man, J.K. Dobbins might be back, whether we like it or not. This is going to be a bad game. The Carolina Panthers are a bad offense. They're going to run the football. That's what Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh want to do. That's what's going to get done. J.K. Dobbins, a top 20 back for me here this week. Now, coming in at 21, I do have David Montgomery. He plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. David Montgomery was the start of the week last week. He kind of bailed us out in overtime when he got all of those carries and it got into the end zone. Rushed the ball 17 times for 94 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, like I said, that happened in overtime. That being said, he was averaging about 5.4 yards per carry. Solid efficiency numbers from David Montgomery. Probably going to have a better week this week, but still, I think with Jahmyr Gibbs, you cap the upside. You don't get a lot of PPR points from David Montgomery. He's more of a, we want a touchdown, and if we don't get the touchdown, he's going to just have a mediocre week because he's going to be efficient on the ground. So he comes in for me as my running back 21. Now coming in at 22, and the last player in this running back 2 tier, it is going to be Najee Harris. Najee Harris, he plays against the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are a bad defense for the most part. We saw last week, they're also not just a good football team. Najee, he rushed the ball 20 times for 70 yards. There was not a lot of Jalen Warren involved. Cordero Patterson was involved, but really not that much either. He also had 1 catch for 9 yards. Justin Fields is most likely going to be the starter. At least that's what it sounds like as of this moment. That being said, they need to score an offensive touchdown. They didn't do that last weekend. We want to see that happen here in week 2 against the Denver Broncos. But Najee Harris, he looks like the bell cow in this offense and does offer some low-end running back 2 type of upside here this week. Now we're going to move on to my tier 5. Tier 5, we're going to say these are the fringe running back 2s. So they could end up as back-end running back 2s, but they're on that fringe line between running back 2 and running back 3. Coming in at 23 overall, it is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. I was a little bit impressed with Brian Robinson last week. The offense overall for the Washington Commanders didn't look good, but they did use Brian Robinson pretty heavily. He rushed the ball 12 times for 40 yards. He had a touchdown on the ground. He was also being used in the receiving game a little bit. 3 of the passes that he caught went for 49 yards in the receiving game. So Brian Robinson is being utilized a little bit better this year. I do like what I see out of that. This is a game against the New York Giants. Probably going to be 2 mediocre offenses at best going against each other. Brian Robinson, he has very minimal upside, but he should see the volume that he does end up in that kind of back end running back 2 territory. Now coming in at 24 for me, it is going to be Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones actually looked quite good last week. He rushed the ball 14 times for 94 yards and a touchdown. He averaged 6.7 yards per carry in this game against the New York Giants, but now he gets the San Francisco 49ers, who is a much stiffer defense here in week 2. It's going to be a lot harder to run against this team than it was to run against the Giants when you were up all game. That being said, he can be used in the receiving game, so there is some upside with him there, but he does fall in as my running back 24 here this week. Now coming in at my running back 25, I have Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. He plays against the New York Jets, and the New York Jets defense just got dismantled by Jordan Mason. Maybe that was the scheme, maybe it wasn't, but I don't think anybody really feels like Jordan Mason is an elite talent at the NFL level, and we all probably feel like Tony Pollard is a better talent than Jordan Mason. He also saw the majority of the workload last week. He rushed the ball for 82 yards and a touchdown on 16 carries last week. Even though we were told that this was going to be a 1A, 1B type of backfield, it was not. He also caught 3 of the 4 targets that he had for 12 yards. He was used as the starting running back. Tajay was used as the backup running back, and I'm going to operate with that being the case here in week 2. Comes in for me as my running back 25. Now coming in at my running back 26, I have Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. He plays on the road at the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had a very solid day here in week 2. Tallied 44 rushing yards and 1 touchdown on 12 carries. He also was used a lot in the receiving game. Caught 6 of 7 targets for 25 yards. He also scored a 2-yard touchdown run late in the 4th quarter. So very solid day from Jerome Ford. That is not always going to be the norm, but it does look like they're going to lean on Jerome Ford while Nick Chubb is still recovering from this injury, and Jerome Ford looks like a very solid NFL caliber running back. So he comes in for me as this kind of fringe running back 2 this week, but my 26th overall running back in my rankings. Now coming in at my running back 27, another Miami Dolphin, it is going to be Raheem Mostert. Like I said, these guys are dealing with injuries. We're operating as if they're playing. More to come here. Like I said, be a member of that Discord. It is free to join. More updates coming there. More videos on the channel soon. Make sure you're subscribed. All that good stuff. Yada, yada, yada. They play the Buffalo Bills divisional matchup. Raheem Mostert didn't have the week that he wanted in week 1, but he should still be a plug and play option as a fringe running back 2, kind of running back 3 category at times for the Miami Dolphins. We know how good that rushing offense is, and he comes in for me as my running back 27. Now, running back 28 is going to be DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. Very disappointed in what DeAndre Swift did in week 1. Obviously, very disappointed in what the Chicago Bears did offensively in week 1. That being said, Swift, he rushed for 30 yards on about 10 attempts. He didn't catch the only target that he received, and 20 of the 30 yards that he had did come from one play. So not a good day from the Bears. That shouldn't be expected to be the norm either, but they play on the road against the Houston Texans. This is a tough defense. We saw that they were kind of tough against the run here this week when they did play against Jonathan Taylor. So this is a tougher matchup. Swift isn't as talented as Jonathan Taylor. He's more of a RB3, but a fringe running back 2, I think, as well for me here this week. So let's move on to tier 6. Tier 6 is what we are going to call the low upside. Yeah, low upside, not high upside. They don't have a ton of upside, but they're running back 3s purely based off of volume and some of the other considerations. Coming in at running back 29, I got Devin Singletary. He plays against the Washington Commanders. He rushed the ball last week 10 times for 37 yards. He added 4 receptions for about 15 yards. The volume's there. This should be hopefully a better week for them offensively. If not, we could be looking at a quarterback change very quickly. There's already, a lot of boos and heckles coming in New York already. So we'll see what happens in week 2. There's not a lot of upside with Singletary, but he is going to get the volume. Now, coming in at my running back 30, I am going to have Zach Moss of the Cincinnati Bengals. And the one thing that I found positive about Zach Moss last week, even though that was a bad offensive outing from the Cincinnati Bengals, even though the game kind of turned into a negative game script for the Bengals and they were having to pass the football, Zach Moss was still involved. He tallied about 44 rushing yards. He had a touchdown on 9 carries. He caught 2 of the 4 targets that he had for about 17 yards. That being said, Zach Moss, he looks like the starting running back in this backfield, and Chase Brown looks like the change of pace running back. Zach Moss should be operating as that in our fantasy football lineups as well. This game against the Kansas City Chiefs, it's a tough defense. It's going to be very competitive. Cincinnati is going to have to show up much more prepared than they were last week if this wants to be a competitive game. But that being said, he comes in as my running back 30 here in my rankings. Now, running back 31 is going to be Ezekiel Elliott, and Ezekiel Elliott kind of shocked me as well. We're talking about J.K. Dobbins, coming back and kind of resurging. Zeke kind of looked the same way. He had a little bit more juice than I thought he had left in the tank. Tallied about 40 rushing yards and a touchdown on 10 carries. He also caught both of his targets for about 9 yards. Found the end zone, as I mentioned, on a 3-yard carry in the second quarter. So that being said, Zeke, he is operating as well kind of as the 1A in this backfield. He is not necessarily the starter or the full-time starter where I'm confident in calling him that, but he is 1A to Rico Dowdle's 1B. The reality is neither of these guys are great, but Ezekiel Elliott has more upside because he is going to be used on the goal line. He comes in for me as my running back 31. Now, coming in at 32, I have Javonte Williams, and man, how the mighty have fallen. He is going to be playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 8 carries last week for 23 yards. He caught 1 of 2 targets for 0 yards receiving. The problem for Javonte Williams is they've been mixing in Estime. They're mixing in a lot of Jaleel McLaughlin, and they're going to be playing in negative game scripts. They're not a good offense. Bo Nix looked like he was very a deer in headlights, pretty much. That's what he looked like last weekend. So Javonte Williams, not super confident in him right now. In fact, if you were going to invest in anybody in this Broncos backfield, the cheaper investment would be Jaleel McLaughlin, and he's basically going to give you the same type of output as Javonte. So give me Javonte here at 32, and I'm not super comfortable with that either. So he just is kind of a guy that I feel like is a low upside running back 3. Now, coming in as the last low upside running back 3, it is going to be Jahmyr White. Look, Jahmyr White was spelled by Alexander Mattison much more than we wanted, especially when the game kind of got out of hand. They went to Alexander Mattison because he has some pass catching ability as well. That said, Jahmyr, he did tally about 44 rushing yards on 13 carries. He caught both of his targets for 2 yards. Mattison is going to be more involved than people want. This game at the Baltimore Ravens is going to be a very tough matchup for them. I can't imagine that they're leading much in this one, and Jahmyr is the running back that's going to get the run when they're leading. They're not going to be leading in this one. You might see more Mattison than you want. Jahmyr's upside is quite capped unless he can find the end zone, which maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't really want to bet on a Jahmyr White touchdown here in week 2. So he does come in as my running back 33. And now let's move on to tier 7. Tier 7, we'll talk about it quite quickly. These are all flex plays. So you can play them in your flex if you're in a pinch. Maybe you're like me. I have a team that has Puka Nacua, T. Higgins, Hollywood Brown, some others. I'm riddled with injury right now. Maybe you're, playing one of these guys in a pinch. But coming in at running back 34, I have Austin Eckler. He wasn't really used a lot on the ground. He rushed for 10 yards on 2 carries, but he caught 4 passes for 52 yards. So in a PPR league, he's going to have some value for you. And like I said, this is a matchup against the Giants where the interior of that defensive line it's tough, but there is room for you to kind of get some extra plays in the receiving game. So Austin Eckler comes in running back 34. Gus Edwards, they're going to beat the hell out of Carolina. At least, if they're going to do anything like New Orleans did, maybe they're not going to put up that many points, but the reality is it's not going to be that competitive if Carolina looks the way that they looked last weekend. If J.K. Dobbins is running away, they might go to Gus Edwards, give him some extra carries. He still tallied about 26 rushing yards on 11 carries last week, caught his one target for about 2 yards. Maybe he finds the end zone in this one as well. He's a guy that I have coming in kind of as a flex play, but my running back 35 overall. And then 36, Tyjae Spears. Like I said, he is the backup to Tony Pollard. He's kind of operating as that. He had 21 rushing yards on 4 attempts last week. He caught all 4 of his targets for 11 yards. So in a PPR format, you get the PPR points for the 4 receptions. He's a guy who doesn't have a ton of upside unless Tony Pollard gets hurt, but they have talked about wanting to get a little bit more to that 1A, 1B. I'll believe it when I see it. For now, he's my running back 36 and a flex play that you probably don't need to throw into your lineup. So there you have it. That's my top 36 running backs here in week 2. As I mentioned, some of the news that we're going to get over the next 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours is going to change these rankings. Make sure you are a member of the Discord. The Discord is the best place to get advice from me. I give you the updates as those come. I answer the questions as that news comes and those come into the inbox. So make sure you are in that Discord. Like I said, it's free to join, so there is no risk in doing that. Also, make sure you hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video. Hit the subscribe button. That way you see more of our content when it does come out. And last but not least, make sure you have a good day and go win week 2. I will see you guys on our next video. I have nothing else for you today. Until then, peace out.